Good afternoon, it's Dr. Chris English here with another Tech Talk, and today we're going to talk about some winterization. You know, as we move through the month of November and start getting closer to those colder days in January, you need to be prepared with your car to make sure of really three major things that you need to look at. Beyond checking the oil and knowing those basics of an automobile, you really need to look at your antifreeze, understand if your antifreeze levels are good, and to really know what type of antifreeze you may need for your car. We're also going to take a look at tire pressure. We get a lot of complaints as mechanics about tire indicator lights coming on, and we'll talk a few minutes about that as well. And then we'll take a quick look at just your basics for your windshield wipers and just overall fluids and understanding what you need to look for, and just to make sure you're all ready to go for winter. So we're going to start first looking at antifreeze, and so we'll take a look here under the hood of this various vehicle that we have, and talk about various antifreezes that you need to be aware of for the vehicle so that you are correctly installing the right type of antifreeze. So let's take a look at the antifreeze levels. So when you're looking at your coolant reservoirs, you really have two locations. You have the radiator, has a radiator cap that's under pressure, and then you have the actual reservoir that's an overflow tank. What's extremely important to know about this safety is that you never want to remove the radiator cap, and that's the silver cap you see here. Not all caps are silver. Some are black in color. Some even can be discolored just from age. Most important to know is don't remove it under pressure, and that's when the vehicle is hot. If you're in dire need to remove the radiator cap for a fill, like if you've broke down on the side of the road, car's running hot, or you feel like the radiator is low and itself needs to be refilled, wait till the car's cooled completely down, and it needs to be at ambient temperature. When it's in ambient temperature, and especially if you've waited overnight, the pressure will most likely be all the way off of it. There might be a little bit of residual pressure, but the radiator cap will come off in basically two turns or two clicks. It does have a safety catch on it, but if the radiator cap's not been put back on correctly and you take it off under pressure, it will spray your antifreeze, hot antifreeze, boiling antifreeze back on you, and you'll be burnt. So you always want to just really leave the radiator cap alone. You don't want to touch it at all. Take it to your local garage or dealership to let them service the radiator or to check the fluid in the radiator cap itself. But keep in mind, it could either be chrome in color such as this one, or it might even be black. So what we really want to focus on is the reservoir. And the reservoir is easily identified. A lot of times they'll have a color type of cap on it. Some are multicolor. If you look in the owner's manual, if you're confused, it'll tell you either by a symbol or by color if you're at the right reservoir. This particular vehicle, all the indicators for the fluid levels are in yellow. So we actually have to look at the outline of the fluid, and it looks like an actual radiator or a tank. And so you know that that is your reservoir. The reservoir itself, overflow reservoir, is not under pressure. Pop the lid, no problem. You can see down into the levels of it, and want to make sure that it's either halfway or all the way up to full. Now, because an engine is a closed loop system, your levels in your reservoir can fluctuate, and especially on an older vehicle, can fluctuate up and down as temperature changes. So you may check it in the morning and it be low. You check it during the day when it's hot and it may be higher. That's why you really don't want to run your antifreeze reservoir levels to the add or to that low mark. Make sure that it's halfway up to the full side of the markers on the reservoir itself. Now, one thing to know about the reservoirs, this particular vehicle is easy to see. They're not always easy to see. Because of the design of the under hood carriage, under hood area, just with the close proximity of all the components, these tanks can be hidden in a remote location, and maybe you just can only see the cap. At that time, you can still pop the cap off and look down into the reservoir. Sometimes you can't see the reservoir, and there will be a float bobble that will come up and down based on the levels of the fluid inside the reservoir. If the bobble's coming up, it's pushing up out of it, the fluid's in there and it's full more than likely. If it's all the way down into the tank, then it's low and you need to add. And a lot of times you'll add the antifreeze mix up to the proper level as indicated on the float. So those are usually, you know, in a closer maybe proximity of a smaller vehicle where you don't have a lot of room. They'll hide it kind of, but they still have a reservoir. So always look for the clear reservoir, look for the cap, the proper cap, where you will add your antifreeze to top it off. Always refer to the owner's manual when you are trying to identify the reservoir. And if you can't find it, of course, the internet, the Google, or whatever search engine you want to use is easy access to be able to locate this reservoir and add the fluids. Over the years, we've had various styles of antifreeze. And if you're a generation of my age or maybe a little bit older, you may always remember the green ethylene glycol antifreeze that we used for years, all the way up to the mid-90s. And that ethylene glycol, that green antifreeze, was a generic, very basic antifreeze, had phosphate and silicon in it, and it really was the antifreeze that we used on cast iron engines, and it helped to cut down on so much corrosion. But as we moved through the 90s and up, especially through the 2000s, and everything went to lightweight, heat transfer, economies were driven, you know, by how many miles per gallon you could increase. We went to aluminum, and a lot of aluminum engines and heads and aluminum components in the vehicles, so the antifreeze had to change. The green antifreeze reacted with the aluminum, and as green antifreeze ages, it can actually produce electrolysis. It creates a rust material sometimes between two components of unlike metals. So it is problematic to have green antifreeze. If it's an older vehicle, it's fine. So that's really where we're going to talk and get into the newer type of antifreeze. The newer type of antifreeze are multicolored. You always, as always, refer to your owner's manual or look it up. A lot of manufacturing information is online now. You can look up what the proper antifreeze will be to put in your car, but it is important, extremely important, that you use the right antifreeze. Dexcool, which was a GM antifreeze or extended life antifreeze, typically is orange in color. It is what is called an organic acid technology antifreeze, and the antifreeze is not as corrosive or as toxic. You might have always heard that, you know, with green antifreeze, it was toxic to humans and to pets and to animals, and that's why you didn't, if you had it spilt on the ground, you wanted to make sure you got it up. The orange or the Dexcool, the extended life antifreeze, is not as toxic. It's still deadly for sure, but it's basically made of propylene glycol, and which is used in a lot of food products, a lot of drink products. And so it is a form that is non-toxic, but in around 2012 or so, the USDA mandated that there be a chemical added to make it bitter for pets, so pets aren't attracted to it so much. So you still don't want to spill it on the ground, you want to get it up, but it's not considered toxic like the green antifreeze was back in the day. So you do have the orange antifreeze. That's the most common antifreeze, an extended life antifreeze. And we say extended life because it's typically well over 100,000 miles before it has to be serviced and removed. But you also have hybrid technology antifreeze, which is typically in a yellow, kind of gold-looking color antifreeze, or a typical jug. Can also be blue. Many European cars will use a blue type of antifreeze, and even when you start looking at Toyotas, can have a pink color antifreeze. All these are considered organic type of antifreezes. The main difference between some of the organic versus the hybrids, it would depend on if it still has phosphate in it or nitrates in it. That's really the biggest difference, and that's a little probably too technical, but it is good to know, and because these chemicals don't work well together a lot of times. And so if you have a vehicle that has an organic antifreeze, an orange antifreeze, an extended life antifreeze, and it's not an HOAT, which is a hybrid organic acid technology, it's just a regular organic acid technology, you don't really want to start mixing the two. You definitely do not want to mix these with the green antifreeze. What happens is they tend to sludge, and they will mix, and then the chemicals in them start to break down. What happens is you create clogs in the engine, and which can create overheating problems. So when you are looking to add antifreeze to your reservoir, make sure that you do have the right antifreeze for the vehicle. 9 times out of 10, you can go by the color, but there are a lot of cases, especially on older vehicles, got age on it, the antifreeze color will fade or change because it's picking up the impurities in the engine and absorbing those, and it can change the color of the antifreeze, so you still have to be very careful. Really, one of the easiest solutions for you, if you were to go to your local parts house or to a superstore to be able to buy some type of antifreeze, you can look for a 50-50 mix. Anytime you're adding antifreeze to your vehicle, you want to make sure that it's 50% water and 50% antifreeze. And you can pre-mix this in a jug, or you can buy pre-mixed solutions at these places. The most important thing to know is that when you buy those 50-50 mixes that are pre-mixed, make sure that you're getting the correct antifreeze, whether it's orange antifreeze, even back to the green antifreeze, or whatever other technology you're working. If it's a hybrid type of antifreeze, you can get the pre-mixed 50-50. If you're mixing your own antifreeze and you buy a jug of straight antifreeze and you want to go home and mix it to have a solution ready, you're going to use it in your vehicle, you need to use distilled water. It's best to use distilled water. When you use regular tap water, it still has those chemicals and sulfates in them that really can change the chemical compound of the antifreeze and cause cooling issues. And it can even break the antifreeze down over time and destroy it. So you still want to use distilled water, but for maybe $1, $2 for a gallon, it's pretty cheap to use, and you can make a 50-50 mix solution. Like I said, though, the easiest thing to do is really go out and look for a 50-50 mix. It's already pre-mixed. Talk to your parts house counter guy or lady, and they will tell you what you need for your vehicle if you give them the year model, and you'll be ready to add your antifreeze. So make sure you check your antifreeze levels. Don't worry so much about the temperature as far as coming down if it's under 32 degrees. Now, if you had solid water in it, you'll need to make sure that it's at the right temperature. But when you get into that point, you need to take it to a mechanic. You're going to be taking the radiator cap off to do that, and like I said a few minutes ago, that's a safety issue, and you need to take it to a professional and let them check the temperature level, the freeze point on it, just to be safe. And they'll tell you if you need your antifreeze flushed or maybe need to add some antifreeze. So that's a little bit about antifreeze. Make sure you check your levels and get ready for winter. Come January, we're going to hit some, I'm sure hit some 20-degree days. And you want to make sure that you have the proper levels, and plus it's just good sense for the car to have that antifreeze in there that will keep it cool and keep things working right. So now let's move on to talk a little bit about tires. Tires tend to be an issue during the cold weather months, and we'll take a look at that here in just a second. Right now we really just want to talk about two really main topics, and that's one is the checking the air pressure, knowing and understanding the air pressure, but the tire pressure monitoring system as well in a car. So when we're looking at a tire pressure monitoring system, that's the little light that comes on in your dash as an indicator, either on startup when you got the key on, engine off, and it will go off once the engine does start to run. Sometimes you may have noticed this yellowish orange light come on in the mornings when it's cold and you're driving down the road, and you might get in your car in the afternoon and go to lunch and it's off. And you're trying to figure out, do I have a low tire light? You may not even know what the symbol means. There again, always refer to the owner's manual, or you can look it up on the internet to find out what the indicator may be. Very common in the wintertime for that light to illuminate. The main reason is that the air pressure is low, but it's borderline low enough that it's kicking on what's called the tire pressure monitor sensor that's located inside the rim of the tire. And it's a safety feature that was put on cars back in the early 2000s to alert the driver when the tire was low so that it would not blow out. And that was a key indicator for manufacturers to have that safety component on a car. So the tire pressure monitoring system sees that fluctuation in temperature as you crank it up in the morning cold or as you drive down the road. The main difference is that when we have air, oxygen in a tire, it absorbs moisture, and it has more fluctuation inside a tire. So for every 10 degrees change in temperature, you'll have a 1 pound pressure change difference. So if your tire is scheduled to have 32 pounds of pressure in them, and you're running 32 pounds of pressure when it's hot and it cools off, the tire pressure will be low. And so when you turn your car on and crank it up and you go down the road, that light will illuminate until the tire pressure builds up, the car senses it and turns the light off. It can be an indicator that you have an L in the tire or you have a slow leak in the tire. That's always a possibility. So if the light stays on continuous, please take it to your local professional and have them check the tires. More than likely you have a leak and you need to have it fixed, because that will leave a flat and leave you on the side of the road stranded, or need to change the tire to the spare. Two things that really can correct this is making sure that you maintain proper air pressure. If you're using regular air off of a machine at a gas station or a local garage, make sure that you're keeping that air pressure accurate and where it needs to be. Another quick fix can be kind of costly. Some cars come with it from the factory, is adding nitrogen to the tires. Nitrogen, if you add nitrogen to the tire, you can do it, no problem. It's about $5 to $10 a tire, depending on where you take it to have it done. That's on average. It might be a little more with that because it is a gaseous fuel, but or air. But it, you might have to pay for that up to maybe $15 a tire. Who really knows? You just need to call and find out. But nitrogen is great for tires because it doesn't fluctuate with air pressure, and it's stable under pressure, and it's stable under temperatures. And so what manufacturers have done since introducing the tire pressure monitoring system is that they've incorporated nitrogen into tires. And a lot of times you'll know that you have nitrogen in your tires if your valve stem cap is green in color. There again, look at your owner's manual. You can refer to it, but you can go to your local technician, local tire shop, and ask them if they can service your car with nitrogen in the tires, and they can easily do that. The biggest thing is making sure that you are keeping proper air pressure in your tire. So now we're going to check our air pressure and take a look at it, and so you have an understanding of how to check your air in your tires. So all vehicles on their tires will have a max pressure under load indicator on the tire. Never fill the tire to that pressure indicated by PSI, what's outlined on the rim of the tire. Always look for the indicator inside the door. You can look in the owner's manual, or you also could refer to some type of information online. The reason that's important is that the indicator inside in your door panel is a cold inflation. And remember, that's going back to what we talked about, the tire pressure fluctuating. You want to check it best when it's cool, and make sure that you're using the correct pressure based on front to rear of the car, even down to the spare. There are spares that still have that tire pressure monitoring system on it that can monitor that spare tire, and it can kick that light on. And you may think you have a tire low when really it's the spare that's low. So you really want to gauge your tire pressure, know your cold air temp by these markings inside on this pillar of this car. All the vehicles will have this on it, especially the newer vehicles. It'll be located on the pillar here. It could be located on the flat side. It could be even located on the front side as you step into the vehicle. But as well, the owner's manual will have that. And if we look at this particular car, cold pressure is 33 for the front, 35 for the rear. And the reason that the rear is a little bit higher is for load. So if you do have something in the back of the vehicle, it can stand that maximum pressure under load, and that's what you're after when you're looking at tire pressure. So let's check the tire pressure on the car now. It's a very simple job to do. So let's check the air pressure in the tire. A lot of tires will have a max load pressure on the side of the tire. Do not gauge your tires by that and fill the tire to that pressure. If you were to have an extreme load, like you're towing something, then you may consider that. But you still need to refer to manufacturer specifications when you do want to add pressure into a tire when you will have it under load. Under typical, You're going to refer to the indicator of how much pressure you need in the tire. You'll remove the valve stem cap. The cap, if it's green in color, is a tell sign that it is a nitrogen-filled tire. You can add regular air to it and it'd be fine. It's just you're going to have that fluctuation like we talked about. If you're at a location, at a tire store where you can get nitrogen, like I said, you probably have to pay for it. You can fill it with the nitrogen, but have your professional do that for you. So we're just going to check this one. It's a basic air system on the car. I have a typical tire gauge that we're going to be looking at. The tire gauges, all tire gauges are really set up in increments of 2. So it goes from 10 pounds. For this one, we're going to go no farther than 40 pounds, and it's in increments of 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and so forth up. It does have a valve inside the check, and so you'll just push it on and relieve it. And if we're looking at this particular tire, and this tire's been warmed, it's been ridden down the road, so it's at 30. And then we just take the little black line, and that's our hash mark that cuts across that tells us our number indicator. So for this one, we got 2, 4, 6, 8. So right now we're sitting at 38 pounds of pressure on this tire. And the indicator for rears was 35 at cold inflation. So 38 pounds is perfect. You do not need to let the air pressure down to 35 or what was indicated. Remember, that was cold pressure only. If you go out in the morning first thing before you take off, you want to check the air in your tires and you find that they're low, gauge that tire pressure so that if, like say for this one, if it's standard 35 on the rear and I checked it in the morning and it was cold and it was at 28 pounds, I would want to take that difference so that when I go down the road and I'm traveling and my tire does heat up, I want to gauge that by 3 or 4 pounds to get it up to the mark. Remember that as the car heats, the tires heat, you're going to build that air pressure in the tires. So there again, very simple to be able to check. Just hold the back of it, push down. You'll hear a little bit of air come out, just pop off, and you'll check the air pressure based on the tick mark to that bottom line of the tire pressure gauge. Okay, so no matter the time of year, you always want to make sure that your oil levels are good. It's always best there again to check your fluids when the vehicle's cold. Oil is probably the most simplest one to check, and it can be checked anytime. The only thing you have to be really careful of is when the engine is hot, like you've been going down the interstate. If you decide that you need to check your oil, or maybe you're getting a little bit of an oil light flicker and you think you might need oil, just keep in mind that the vehicle is hot and it can burn you, so you got to be very careful in where you place your hands. But this particular vehicle is cold, it's easy to get to. The dipstick is indicated there again with yellow. This particular vehicle is using yellow on all of the fluid indicators. If I pull it out and I look at the stick, it has a minimum and a max line. As long as the oil is somewhere in there, in between is good. You just want to wipe the oil off of the stick so that it's completely dry. You'll put the dipstick back down into the tube, immediately pull it back out, don't wipe the end, and take a look at it. And of course this one is all the way full. If the oil line is low on it, that's where you'll need to add an oil to the vehicle. If on the dipstick it's all the way to the bottom, the indicator indicates it's a quart low. If it's halfway, it's a half a quart, but you can't typically buy a half a quart. You have to buy a full quart of oil. But it's okay for it to go all the way down to being a quart low, then you add to it. If it's not shown on the dipstick at all, wipe it again, check it to verify that, because oil is clean. It can be clean. It can have a clear look to it, especially if it's a new vehicle. You may not be able to see it. But if it is all the way low, there's no oil on it, only add a quart at a time and check it, because you do not want to overfill an engine with oil. It'll create a foaming and can damage the engine. If you need to add oil, refer to the oil cap. This particular oil cap is easy to get to. Most are up top. It comes right off. You can use a funnel to add the oil. This particular vehicle takes 0W20 oil. We're not going to get into specifics of oil today, but you can look here on the oil cap, or you look on owner's manual or on the internet to find out what grade of oil and what type of oil to use. It could be a synthetic base, it could be just a regular crude oil based oil. Lastly, the thing that we want to talk about is windshield washer fluid. There again, yellow cap, but it has an indicator of a windshield on it, squirting. good indication that that's where your washer fluid goes. The biggest thing with washer fluid, you don't have to mix them. They come pre-mixed, but look for one that has a de-icer in it. Since we're talking winterization, you might have it in the mornings, get that ice kind of glaze across your windshield. You know, if you, as long as you don't have a lot of dirt and a lot of really bad material on the glass, when you spray the water and the washer fluid, it's a de-icer. It will spray the windshield before the windshield wipers come up. And that way it's kind of cleaning and dampening the windshield so it doesn't scratch the windshield. But there's still a possibility, so you still have to be careful. The biggest thing for winterization is make sure that you use a de-icer. That's really going to help to take that thin level of layer of ice off of the windshield. Now, of course, if we have a snow or if it's a whole lot thicker on an icing day, that's not going to work. You'll need an ice scraper to get some of that type of residue off. But de-icer, any type of washer fluid, Parts House, your local superstore, grocery store will even have a lot of times have washer fluid. Easy to add. You just fill it up all the way to the top and good to go. It's not under pressure at all. Very easy to fill. Okay, that's just the quick basics of just a small little being prepared for winter. It's really not a full winterization when you get into really servicing your car. Take it to an automotive mechanic or technician that's ASC certified. That's always good to look for. And make sure that you ask for the proper things that need to be done to your car. You always need to actually service and change the fluids in the vehicle. So like we talked with the antifreeze and the engine oil and other various fluids in the car, those do need to be changed in service intervals. That way it keeps fresh and make sure your car stays in that prime new condition like you always want it to be. So this is a quick tech tip, I hope, and that you might be able to take a little bit of information with this and be able to carry you through the winter. We'll have a couple more coming up in the next few months, so I look forward to seeing you soon. So have a great day.